Understanding emotional blackmail and its impact. Have you ever felt like you're being manipulated but couldn't put your finger on why? This subtle form of manipulation, known as emotional blackmail, is much more common than you might think. It's not the kind of blackmail that involves threats of exposing a secret or forcing you to hand over money. Instead, it's a psychological game that pulls on your emotions, especially in romantic relationships, but it can happen anywhere. Emotional blackmail can often fly under the radar because it's not as obvious as physical abuse or threats of violence. The manipulator doesn't always shout or demand directly. They use your feelings of fear, guilt, and obligation to control your actions. That's why many people don't even realize they're being manipulated until the damage has already been done. But if you know what to look for, you can identify it before it causes significant harm. In this video, we'll dive deep into what emotional blackmail is, how it operates, and what you can do to stop it. By the end, you'll have a better understanding of how to protect yourself and take control of your emotions, ensuring healthier relationships moving forward. What is emotional blackmail? At its core, emotional blackmail occurs when someone uses your emotions against you to get what they want. The manipulator may know personal details about you, like your vulnerabilities or secrets, and use them to create fear, guilt, or obligation in you. This tactic is particularly common in intimate relationships, where emotions are already heightened. The concept of emotional blackmail was first introduced in the 1990 book Emotional Blackmail by Dr. Susan Forward. In it, she explains how manipulative individuals use the FOG method, fear, obligation, and guilt, to control others. FOG is an apt description, not only because it's an acronym, but also because it illustrates the confusion and disorientation that often comes with being manipulated in this way. Unlike physical blackmail, where the stakes are more concrete, such as a threat to expose a secret, emotional blackmail plays out in more subtle ways, leading the victim to feel responsible for another person's emotional well-being. If you're feeling trapped in such a situation, it's important to understand that emotional blackmail is a form of manipulation, and recognizing it is the first step toward breaking free. How does emotional blackmail unfold? Emotional blackmail typically follows a predictable pattern with 6 distinct stages. Let's walk through each stage to better understand how emotional blackmail develops and how it affects the victim. The demand. It all starts with a demand. The blackmailer wants something from you, whether it's your time, money, loyalty, or to change something about yourself. However, instead of asking politely, they make a direct demand. For example, they might tell you that you need to stop seeing certain friends or cut ties with people they don't approve of. In essence, they are telling you that if you truly care about them, you will comply with their wishes. At this stage, the request may seem unreasonable or controlling, but it's still veiled in such a way that it feels difficult to refuse. You may feel guilty for wanting to hold on to your friends, but your partner or loved one is telling you that if you do, it will hurt them. This creates an emotional tug-of-war where you are left questioning what to do. Resistance. If you resist the blackmailer's demand, it moves into the next stage. Resistance. Instead of outright refusing, you might try to avoid the situation or give indirect responses. Perhaps you say you're too busy, or you forget to mention plans with your friends. You might offer excuses or tell half-truths to avoid confrontation, all in an effort to preserve the relationship without giving in to the demand. While this might feel like the easiest option in the short term, it doesn't stop the cycle of manipulation. In fact, resistance simply prolongs the process, allowing the blackmailer to tighten their grip on your emotions. Pressure. At this point, the blackmailer intensifies their tactics. This is where the fear, obligation, and guilt, the FOG, really come into play. They will use your emotions to pressure you into compliance. They may express fear that you will abandon them or make you feel guilty for putting your own needs first. The pressure may be subtle, like, "I thought we were a team, and a team doesn't put their friends ahead of their partner." Or it may be more intense, such as, "If you keep ignoring my needs, I'm going to have to leave." You may feel confused or conflicted, unsure if you're being unreasonable or if your partner is simply expressing their needs. This is when emotional blackmailers are most effective because they target your sense of empathy and responsibility, creating a fog of confusion. The pressure makes you feel that there's no real choice. You either comply or the consequences will be dire. The stages of emotional blackmail threats. Once the blackmailer senses resistance, they will likely escalate their tactics. This is where the manipulation takes on a more overt form. Threats. These threats may not always be violent or explicit, but they serve as a means to force you into submission. The manipulator may tell you that if you don't comply, they will leave you, or they might hint at harming themselves or taking drastic actions to make you feel guilty. They could say things like, "If you go out with your friends, I'll just have to find someone else," or "I don't know what I'll do if you don't listen to me." At this stage, the blackmail becomes emotionally taxing. The manipulator is making you feel responsible for their happiness or even their well-being. These threats are often framed as the result of your actions, so you may feel guilty if you don't comply with their wishes. The idea is to create a sense of urgency, convincing you that failing to act according to their demands will result in something severe. You may find yourself constantly questioning your own actions, wondering if you're being unfair or selfish. Threats can also be veiled in a more positive light. For instance, the blackmailer might say, "If you choose me over your friends, I'll show you how much I appreciate you," making it feel like a choice between love and neglect. This type of manipulation is particularly dangerous because it plays on your desire for validation and affection, especially if you've been made to feel responsible for the other person's emotional state. Compliance now comes the crucial turning point. If you give in to the threats, you've entered the stage of compliance. At this point, you may have surrendered to the demands, hoping that the situation will resolve itself and that the blackmailer will be satisfied. Perhaps you agree to cancel plans with your friends, apologize for something you didn't do, or allow your partner to control more aspects of your life. However, compliance doesn't necessarily mean peace. While you may temporarily avoid conflict, the manipulator is now convinced that their tactics are working. They have successfully used your emotions to get what they wanted. This stage is particularly harmful because it reinforces the power dynamic between you and the blackmailer. By complying, you're sending a message that their manipulation is effective, which increases the likelihood that they will use the same tactic again in the future. It's important to understand that compliance in this context is not a solution. It's simply a temporary way to escape the pressure. But in the long run, this only deepens the cycle of manipulation. You might think that by giving in, you'll avoid future conflict, but in reality, the emotional blackmail will only continue, growing stronger and more insidious over time. Repetition. The final stage of emotional blackmail is repetition. If the manipulator sees that their tactics are successful, they will continue to use them. This means that once you've complied, you can expect the cycle to repeat itself. The blackmailer will find new demands, new threats, and new ways to create pressure on you. It's not always the same demand each time. It could be something entirely different, but the pattern will remain the same. Over time, as this cycle continues, you may find yourself growing increasingly worn down. You may no longer recognize the initial stages of emotional blackmail, and you could become numb to the manipulation. The more often you comply, the harder it becomes to break free from the cycle, because you start to feel as though there's no escape. In some cases, the blackmailer may even escalate their tactics, becoming more demanding or using more severe threats. This is why emotional blackmail is so dangerous. It often doesn't end with a single occurrence. Each time you comply, the blackmailer feels validated in their approach, and they learn that they can control you using fear, guilt, and obligation. This repetition creates an ongoing power struggle that can leave you feeling trapped and powerless. Recognizing and responding to emotional blackmail. Now that you understand the stages of emotional blackmail, let's talk about how you can recognize it in your own life and what you can do to break the cycle. Emotional blackmail is not always easy to spot, especially when you're emotionally involved in the situation. However, by becoming more aware of the signs and learning how to respond, you can regain control and prevent further manipulation. Signs you're being emotionally blackmailed. The first step to dealing with emotional blackmail is recognizing it. It's easy to get caught up in the emotions and feel overwhelmed, but if you notice any of the following patterns in your relationship, it's important to step back and assess the situation. Constant feelings of guilt. If you constantly feel guilty for things you haven't done wrong or for simply wanting to take care of yourself, That's a red flag. Emotional blackmailers often make you feel like you're responsible for their emotional state. For example, they might say, "If you loved me, you would do this," or "You know how much I need you. Don't you care about me?" This manipulation works because it takes advantage of your natural empathy. Over time, you may feel pressured to make choices that are more about managing their emotions than caring for your own needs. Fear of their reaction. Are you afraid of how the person will react if you don't comply with their wishes? Emotional blackmail often involves making you feel scared of their anger, disappointment, or withdrawal. You might find yourself walking on eggshells, always trying to avoid upsetting them. The manipulator may use tactics like silent treatment, threats of leaving, or even passive-aggressive behavior to control your actions. If you're constantly altering your behavior to avoid these reactions, it's a sign that emotional blackmail is at play. Obligated to always please them. Emotional blackmailers often make you feel like you have to please them in order to avoid conflict. They may say things like, "I can't live without you," or "You owe me this," making you feel that their happiness is your responsibility. This feeling of obligation can be emotionally draining, especially when you're forced to prioritize their needs over your own. Over time, you may begin to lose sight of what you want or need in the relationship, feeling like you're walking on a tightrope where every decision could trigger conflict. Overwhelming sense of responsibility. When you feel that the emotional well-being of the other person rests entirely on your actions, it can feel incredibly burdensome. You might feel like you're the only one who can make things better or prevent a crisis. This sense of responsibility can be used against you. The blackmailer may guilt-trip you into believing that their happiness is entirely dependent on your actions. This can cause you to feel trapped, as though you're obligated to always meet their needs, even if it comes at the cost of your own well-being. Manipulation through withholding affection. One of the more subtle forms of emotional blackmail is withholding affection or attention. The manipulator may use their love or affection as a bargaining chip. For example, they might say, "If you don't do this for me, I won't talk to you," or "You won't get any affection until you agree to what I want." This creates an unhealthy dynamic where love and affection are conditional. Over time, you may start to feel that the only way to receive love or approval is by constantly meeting their demands, which can cause deep emotional distress and erode your self-worth. Why do people resort to emotional blackmail? Understanding why someone would engage in emotional blackmail is an important part of addressing the issue. While it's no excuse for their behavior, there are several reasons why a person might use this tactic. Insecurity. Often, people who emotionally blackmail others are deeply insecure. They may feel like they are not worthy of love or attention unless they can control the situation. By manipulating others, they create a false sense of power, which temporarily makes them feel better about themselves. This insecurity can manifest in many ways, whether through jealousy, possessiveness, or constant need for validation. The blackmailer might feel that without manipulation, they would lose the love or attention they crave. Lack of communication skills. Some blackmailers don't know how to express their needs in a healthy way. Instead of having an open conversation about their feelings, they resort to manipulation. They may not have learned how to ask for what they want in a respectful and straightforward manner, leading them to use guilt, fear, or obligation to get their needs met. This inability to communicate directly can result in a pattern of passive-aggressive behavior, where they expect you to understand their needs without them ever saying them outright. Narcissism or self-centeredness. In some cases, emotional blackmailers may be narcissistic, meaning they are overly focused on their own needs and desires at the expense of others. They expect others to cater to their wants without considering the feelings or well-being of those around them. In these situations, emotional blackmail becomes a tool for maintaining control and getting what they want without concern for the other person's needs. Narcissistic behavior is particularly toxic in relationships because it involves an inherent imbalance of power, where the blackmailer only sees their needs as valid and disregards yours completely. Fear of rejection or abandonment. Another reason for emotional blackmail is the fear of abandonment. Some individuals feel that unless they manipulate the other person, they might lose them. This is particularly common in relationships where there is an underlying fear of being rejected or replaced. The blackmailer uses manipulation as a way of preventing that fear from becoming a reality. These fears often come from past experiences, such as childhood neglect or previous broken relationships, which can lead the individual to cling to unhealthy behaviors to keep the relationship intact. What to do if you're being emotionally blackmailed? Now that you've identified the signs of emotional blackmail, here's how you can regain your power and stop the cycle. Recognize the pattern. Recognizing that you're being manipulated is the first step. If you can spot the signs of emotional blackmail, you can stop it from escalating. Write down your interactions with the person and observe if there's a pattern of using guilt, fear, or obligation to control your behavior. Keeping a journal or a record can help you visualize the manipulation and help you decide on the best course of action. If the pattern is clear, you'll feel more empowered to take control of the situation. Set boundaries. Setting boundaries is one of the most effective ways to combat emotional blackmail. This means clearly defining what you are and aren't willing to tolerate in the relationship. For example, you might say, "I'm happy to spend time with you, but I'm not willing to give up my friends." Or, "I understand you're upset, but I can't accept threats or manipulation as a way to get what you want." Setting boundaries requires firmness and consistency. The person engaging in emotional blackmail may try to test your limits, but it's important to hold your ground and reinforce your limits without feeling guilty. Don't give in to the threats. One of the most difficult aspects of dealing with emotional blackmail is resisting the pressure to give in to the manipulator's threats. Stand firm in your decision, even if it feels uncomfortable. You are not responsible for their emotions or their happiness. Threats are designed to trigger your fear, but you can't allow them to dictate your actions. If you give in, you're allowing the manipulator to continue their harmful behavior. Stay committed to your own well-being. Communicate clearly and assertively. Have an honest conversation with the person using emotional blackmail. Let them know how their actions are making you feel and explain that you cannot accept this behavior. Be clear about your boundaries and tell them that you expect mutual respect in the relationship. Clear, direct communication can help dismantle the manipulative behavior. If the person is open to discussion, it can lead to positive changes in the relationship. Seek support. Sometimes, emotional blackmail can be so overwhelming that it feels impossible to handle alone. Reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or therapist for support. Talking things through with someone who understands can help you gain perspective and strength. What happens if you don't address emotional blackmail? If emotional blackmail is not confronted and addressed, it can have severe long-term effects on your mental health and relationships. Loss of self-esteem. Constantly giving in to emotional blackmail can erode your self-esteem. Over time, you may start to believe that you're responsible for the other person's happiness and that any conflict or upset is your fault. Emotional exhaustion. Trying to meet the demands of someone who is emotionally blackmailing you is incredibly draining. It's exhausting to be constantly on edge, wondering if your actions will trigger another manipulation tactic. Enabling toxic behavior. If you keep giving in to emotional blackmail, you may unintentionally reinforce the manipulative behavior. The person using emotional blackmail will see that it works and will continue to use it to get their way. Increased conflict. As the blackmailer continues to push their demands, the relationship will become more strained. You may begin to harbor resentment, which can lead to anger, frustration, and passive-aggressive behavior. Rebuilding your life after emotional blackmail. After identifying emotional blackmail and setting boundaries, you may find yourself at a crossroads. The situation might still feel overwhelming, especially if you're dealing with someone close to you. Whether the relationship is with a romantic partner, family member, or friend, breaking free from the cycle of emotional blackmail can be challenging. But it's not only possible, it's essential for your emotional health and long-term well-being. In this final part, we'll focus on how to rebuild your life after emotional blackmail, regain your sense of self, and ensure that your future relationships are healthy and fulfilling. Healing and self-care. Recovering from emotional blackmail is a process that requires time, patience, and self-compassion. It's important to recognize that emotional manipulation can take a toll on your mental and emotional health, but with the right strategies, you can rebuild and thrive. Allow yourself to heal. Healing from emotional blackmail doesn't happen overnight. You may feel a range of emotions, from anger and resentment to sadness and confusion. It's normal to have mixed feelings about the relationship, especially if there are strong emotional ties. Allow yourself to feel these emotions without judgment. Bottling them up will only prolong the healing process. Give yourself permission to grieve the loss of the relationship, the emotional manipulation, and the pain it caused. Recognize that your feelings are valid, and the process of healing involves acknowledging the hurt before moving forward. Prioritize your well-being. After dealing with emotional blackmail, you may have neglected your own needs in favor of meeting the manipulator's demands. Now is the time to focus on yourself. Prioritize activities that nourish your body, mind, and soul. This might include regular exercise, eating well, pursuing hobbies, and taking time for relaxation. Don't feel guilty for focusing on your own well-being. In fact, doing so is essential for your recovery. Reconnect with things that bring you joy and peace, whether that's spending time in nature, reading, meditating, or spending time with people who uplift and support you. Rebuild your self-esteem. Emotional blackmail can deeply affect your sense of self-worth, making you question your value and your ability to make decisions. To heal from this, you need to rebuild your self-esteem. Start by recognizing your strengths and accomplishments, no matter how small they may seem. Affirmations can be a powerful tool in this process. Begin each day by telling yourself something positive about who you are and what you bring to the world. Practice self-compassion and remind yourself that you deserve to be treated with respect, love, and kindness. Establishing new patterns in relationships. One of the most important steps in moving forward is ensuring that you don't repeat the patterns of emotional blackmail in future relationships. Emotional manipulation can warp your sense of what is normal in a relationship, and it can be tempting to fall into familiar patterns, even if they're unhealthy. To avoid this, here's how you can establish new, healthier patterns. Be selective about who you let into your life. After experiencing emotional blackmail, it's natural to feel cautious about who you trust moving forward. Take your time when building new relationships, and don't feel pressured to let people into your inner circle too quickly. Trust must be earned, and you should never feel obligated to form close connections with anyone who doesn't treat you with respect. Pay attention to how new people make you feel. Healthy relationships should make you feel supported, valued, and understood, not manipulated or controlled. Practice healthy communication. One of the key signs of emotional blackmail is poor communication, where feelings are often hidden or expressed indirectly. To avoid this in future relationships, practice open, honest, and direct communication. Healthy relationships are built on mutual understanding and respect, and that starts with clear communication about your needs, desires, and boundaries. Make sure that both you and your partner or friends are comfortable expressing yourselves without fear of retaliation or judgment. Open communication should be the foundation of every relationship. Use boundaries as a tool for self-respect. Boundaries aren't just something you use when dealing with emotional blackmail. They should be a fundamental part of every relationship. Boundaries allow you to protect your own mental and emotional health while respecting the needs of others. They also help establish the mutual respect needed for healthy, balanced relationships. Don't be afraid to assert your boundaries, even in new relationships. Remember, setting boundaries is not about being cruel. It's about ensuring that both parties feel heard, respected, and safe. Watch for red flags. Early on in future relationships, it's important to be aware of any red flags that might indicate the early stages of emotional manipulation. While not all red flags are a sure sign of emotional blackmail, certain behaviors can be warning signs. These include excessive control, demands for constant attention, using guilt or fear to manipulate you, or disregarding your needs for their own. By recognizing these signs early, you can take steps to address them before they escalate. Trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, speak up and protect yourself. Seeking professional help. Sometimes, emotional blackmail leaves deeper scars that require professional help to heal. If you're struggling to overcome the effects of emotional manipulation, it's okay to seek therapy or counseling. A therapist can help you work through feelings of guilt, shame, and confusion, and guide you through the process of rebuilding your self-worth. Therapy can also help you understand the psychological patterns that allowed emotional blackmail to happen in the first place. It can provide you with the tools to identify unhealthy relationships in the future and ensure that you don't fall into the same patterns again. Group therapy or support groups can also be beneficial, especially if you feel isolated or misunderstood. Talking to others who have experienced similar situations can help you feel less alone and provide valuable insights into the healing process. Moving forward, embracing empowerment. Breaking free from emotional blackmail is an empowering journey, even though it may not always feel easy. As you move forward, remember that you are worthy of healthy, loving relationships. The pain and manipulation you experienced do not define you. They are simply chapters in your story that have now passed. Take the lessons you've learned and use them to create a future filled with respect, trust, and mutual understanding. By reclaiming your sense of self and practicing healthy communication, boundaries, and self-care, you can build relationships that nourish and support you. Most importantly, always remember, you have the power to create the life you want. No one has the right to manipulate you, and by standing firm in your values and boundaries, you'll continue to grow stronger, wiser, and more resilient with each passing day.